All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I want to welcome my special guest today, and I'm going to read a little bit about his official bio before we get deep into conversation. I'm so excited for this. So Noah Weisman is here today. He grew up in Burlington, Vermont, began his study of the body and movement back in 2003, training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then found his way to yoga. So he and his wife, Scylla, have founded Sukha Yoga, which is in Burlington, Vermont, and they do amazing stuff. I just know from the programming that they offer that it's a place that you totally want to be. I also know that they are spending a lot of time in Puerto Rico, and so maybe Noah will talk a little bit about that. But let's just welcome to the show, Noah Weisman. Woohoo! So glad you could be here, my friend. And so for folks who are listening, Noah and I met in India when I went there for a 300-hour teacher training in Bhakti Yoga, which we will get to later on in the conversation because that was a very interesting experience. But to start our episode, we will turn to Hafez to sort of channel in some good vibes before we begin. And so I've got the gift, and we'll just randomly select a poem and see what comes forward today. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Let's see. I know, I'm like looking, I shouldn't look. I'm like, how about this one? No. Okay. This one is called Muhammad's Twin. It's a short piece. I know the one you are looking for. I call that man Muhammad's twin. You saw him, so now your eyes are weaving a great net of tenderness that will one day capture God. Huh. I like that. That's so cool. All right, I'm going to read it again because it's so short. Muhammad's twin. I know the one you were looking for. I call that man Muhammad's twin. You saw him once, so now your eyes are weaving a great net of tenderness that will one day capture God. Ooh, what do you think of that poem? Any feelings, any comments you want to make about it?
It's nice, it's deep.
What, yeah, what detail jumps out at you?
Maybe someday it will lead you to God.
Yeah, yeah. I love that too. I like the great net of tenderness, because here we are sort of always looking for God, whether we call it God or universe or spirit, we're always looking for that connection to the divine. And so weaving this net of tenderness really, like, for me, kind of feels playful and a little bit humorous, cracks me up because it's like, how can you catch God? It's like, oh, I'm going to weave this little net of tenderness and just go, got you. It's like, no, that's God's here. God is like everywhere in you, all over. And so I just love bringing Hafez in to kind of set the tone and think about tenderness, thinking about seeking. So Noah, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you got to yoga? I mean, I know from your bio and just from talking to you and seeing your posts on social media that you are very involved in just body movement, body awareness. And so studying jiu-jitsu, I know MMA is part of your life as well. How did you find your way to yoga?
Well, I found my way into yoga courtesy of my wife. Scylla was a yoga teacher already. I was not taking classes with her. I was very much adamant about using my time towards my MMA career and really training in jiu-jitsu, training all of these physical aspects of jiu-jitsu and MMA. And eventually she was able to convince me, yes, it was convincing me to come in to a yoga class. And she entertained me with a physically demanding yoga class.
Love it.
And from there on, I said, hey, if it's physically demanding, then I can incorporate this into my already physical schedule. And then
I missed some of that, Noah. I
Yeah,
think
well,
the internet's a little spotty. It's okay.
yeah, it froze up on me.
It's
So
okay. So were
yeah.
you and Scylla together as like a couple who was dating? Were you married? Like, where were you in your relationship when she finally got you into a yoga class?
We were dating at that point for a few years. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
we
So,
already had our.
so it took her a while to get you in there.
Oh yeah. It took her years to get me in. She had been a yoga teacher the whole time that I knew her, and she would go teach yoga, and I would go for a run or do whatever I was doing. So
Yeah. Yeah. So she got you in the class. You got that physical challenge that you craved after, being very involved with jujitsu and MMA. So then where or when or how did the shift happen where you discovered that yoga is a little bit more than the physical practice?
Okay, good question. So, and I tell this story to different people. Sometimes I I'll go further, and sometimes I won't go as far. But quickly, right now, just for the sake of podcasting, we did a very challenging class. She had put us into shavasana at the end of this class, and might I say that the way that Scylla has taught classes the whole time that I've taken these classes, probably not when she first started, as everybody progresses in their teaching abilities. But when I started with her, I was very lucky because she was very breath oriented, meaning you match the breath to the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And we would also hold these poses for a considerable amount of time. And it was very heavily alignment based cue. Now, not alignment as in this is the picture perfect pose, but this muscle should be doing this. This foot should be doing this. These fingers should be engaged. All of the different things that are happening to keep our mind in the pose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
love it.
So anyhow, after this yoga class, I'm laying in shavasana. So not after, but during yoga class, I'm laying in shavasana, and which is also said to be one of the hardest poses. I understand that more now as I've been practicing. But I had a certain experience during this shavasana, and I'm not going to get into the experience, but after it, I started reading books because I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what I felt or anything really. I was just like, whoa, what was that? So I started reading books, and I started reading BKS Iyengar. I started reading Georg Fürsten, all of these different philosophy books, Edwin Bryant, like all of these different things. So I'm looking into it, and I'm starting to learn more of the philosophy behind yoga. And so that's what really got me in was the classes, the effect that the class had on me, that shavasana that I experienced, which it's not something that's it's not a reproduced feeling. I don't go into shavasana and feel this way every time.
Yeah.
But that shavasana set me off to start researching and figure out what's going on and what is this yoga business and why does that happen. So
yeah. Did you tell Scylla after that happened? Were you like, oh, something just happened? Or did you just keep it to yourself? You're like, oh, I'm going to go research this myself.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I couldn't put a real description to the feeling.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I don't know what I said. I think I just started, I was like on Audible, and I started getting, I just started like Googling yoga and getting different audiobooks and just listening to them over and over and over.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's hard sometimes when you have these these experiences that are beyond the physical realm, beyond the physical body, because when that happens, then language just sort of just is like, right? You're just like, I don't know something happened. I don't have the words for it. So then, because I've had similar experiences where you just experience something that comes out of nowhere and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? What was that? I know how it felt, but I don't have the words for it. So then we all search. And that's sort of what sets people into that seeker mode, like on that path to seek. And that's really powerful. So I'm glad that you are now invested in the whole of yoga, because a lot of folks think yoga is just like warrior two, hold it, hold your breath, you know, and like they all forget that yoga has 8 limbs. And I really love to see you and Scylla actually working together through this yogic path, because it's really beautiful. But I wanted to bring up, so for those of you that are listening to the podcast, Noah is not a white person. You can't see him. So can you tell us a little bit about your identity? Do you identify as a Black man, as a biracial person, as a mixed race person, and what that experience was like in Berlin, well, growing up in Vermont, you know, like, which feels like the whitest state on earth, but I'm not sure if it is.
I think we're second. I think Vermont is second whitest state.
Who's the first? Maine?
I believe it's New Hampshire, which is this is our neighbor anyway. So.
So what was that like, you know, just growing up and then sort of following that trajectory to yoga, you know? So take us through that.
Okay. Well, you know, it was different, because growing up, you notice that things are different because you look a little bit different and whatnot, but you don't really see everybody else as different. You see yourself as different, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So my mother is white, and subsequently, her remarriage was to a white person. So when people would see my sister and I, and they would see the newly adopted, my older sisters, who it was a package deal with my mother's new husband. So they were white. So it was my sister and I that were a little bit darker than everybody else. So we'd be around with people, and they would think that we were fresh air kids. That was kind of the thing. They wouldn't recognize us as being my mother's children's, or at that point I had been adopted, so they wouldn't recognize us as us being my adopted fathers, whom I call dad. So just for sake of clarification for everybody, I call my adopted father dad, and if I am ever referring to my birth father, you'll be hearing it as my birth father, whom is my Black father, my birth father. So,
and
so
also
when I say dad, I call him my dad.
Yeah, and just for context, for those that are listening who don't know what Fresh Air Kids are, it's it's a program from back in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Where
do it, so.
Do they still do it? Yeah.
I don't know what they call it nowadays. But.
Yeah, but they take kids from the city, usually kids of color who come from lower income communities, urban kids, and then they send them to the country to get fresh air. You know, it's just crazy, but it's so wild to think. I mean, it's not unexpected, of course, but to grow up with that kind of awareness that you're not seen as even belonging to your mother, who is your birth mother, you know. So continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, of course. So we grew up kind of. People look at Vermont like it's this very liberal place, and to which I can say, yes, it is, but also it's very sheltered, and in the sheltering, people still have their preconceived notions of you know, everything. They have all of the old movies that they've watched you know, MTV, they watch this, they watch that, so they have these notions of what Black people look like, what Black people sound like,
Yeah.
you know, everything that the media does.
Yeah.
So really and I don't fault them because they haven't had, you know, when I grew up going to elementary school, you know, I didn't have another person of color. Actually, I had a woman, well, now she's a woman, but she was a girl back then. And I think she's Middle Eastern of some sort. I don't know exactly what, but she's darker. So growing up, I just thought she was another Black person. And that was really all there was in my school for a long time until I got to high school, and then there were other Black people around. But growing up, there was nobody around. There was one family that had 19 adopted kids there. Some were
Wow.
from here, some were from there, and those were the other Black kids in town, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there were like these preconceived ideas that you were like those kids, and that your mom, adopted you and took you in, like
Yeah.
that kind of.
I got stopped at the police station one time when I was 15 or at the bus stop by the police while I was going to school to find out what I was doing.
Oh,
you know?
I was going to school. But of course, these are the presumptions that people make. And if they're living in a sheltered community, like you said, and you don't know anything outside of your own bubble, of course, you're just going to react according to whatever the media is telling you, whatever they're dictating to you. And so that must have been really complicated of an experience to go through, because you don't see a lot of Black or brown folks around you. And so you are aware of your difference, but at the same time, have you ever felt, because we usually see ourselves in what's reflected outside of ourselves, right? And so did you ever for a moment consider yourself white?
It's interesting because I don't speak like I'm from the city. And I have a lot of friends that are from the city now, and they say that I sound country. But meanwhile, I'm in Vermont, and they say that I sound this way. So, and all of my best friends are white. So
Yeah.
It's well, I won't say all, but all of my lifelong best friends are white. I have plenty of best friends now that aren't white, but it's I don't know. I guess I got confused a lot even growing up because, for instance, my family was in New York, so we would drive to New York, and when I would get to New York, I would be in a new surrounding, and it felt different because now I'm in a surrounding where there's other people of color. There's this, there's that, there's everybody. Everybody's doing what they're doing, whereas I'm used to being in Vermont where I didn't feel it's still hard for me to even explain, I guess. It's hard to explain.
It's like you're home but not totally home.
Yeah, because, and that's how I feel now. If I go to Vermont, I'm still going to deal with people that look at the floor when I walk by as opposed to making eye contact, or people, moving to the other side of the street if you're walking down the street, that kind of stuff, where it's not them. I don't fault them because it's their own ignorance, really.
Yeah.
But this day and age, things are different where, they have these books where people can read and you can figure out, oh, this is why I'm scared of this person, and this is why I feel this way. But back then, it wasn't really acknowledged. This whole, it was like, you're not a racist if you're not saying if you're not calling somebody the N-word.
Right.
That's how it was back then. It was very blatant. Like, this is a racist action. This isn't. But now we're seeing it's this systemic racism, and that's where so much of the real problems is with the systemic racism and the inability for people to look at themselves and realize how they've been conditioned and then move on from there. because I can talk with, I have lots of experiences growing up that looking back, it's very racist.
Yeah.
But I don't hold these things on these people, because these are even my friends where, certain things that would have happened because they didn't know any better. And I look at who they are now and what they're doing now and how they're acting now, and they've changed said behavior.
Yeah. 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 So you can't fault people in the past because they're working with what they know, right? Their knowledge is limited. But we're in a day and age now where there's a lot more awareness about microaggressions, for example. And so I'm glad to hear that your white friends have modified their behaviors and their thinking, because it shows that they really are invested in their relationship with you. And that's, that's saying something.
Really, and even more so than me, they want to be like these. They've always been good people.
Yeah.
It's just that they have these little conditionings that by no fault of their own, they have these problems. They say these things and they think these ways. So really, it's making them better people, all in all, too. Because outside of my relationship with them, they want to be, even a stranger. It's like you want to be able to treat a stranger correctly and not have anything to do otherwise, really.
Right. Like you want to treat people with respect and some kind of, some kindness and compassion, but some kind of objectivity, like you want to be aware of our conditionings, right? And sort of try to make adjustments to that. And that's really great. That's really great to hear, as far as, the example you're posing for your friends. And basically, I mean, the way I guess is that you probably were like, dude, listen, this is racist. And they're like, what? So
I mean, sometimes yes, and sometimes I was a quiet kid. I'm a little bit more outspoken now, but I was a quiet kid. So a lot of the time I didn't say anything growing up.
Yeah.
I let, and honestly, I was so young, I didn't know it, but I can look at it in retrospect and say, oh, wow, that's bananas that was happening.
Yeah. When you're a kid, though, it's like you don't even know. You don't know any better. You just kind of go and you just accept it, and you're like, oh, I guess this is how it is. So I'm just gonna go with the flow, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it's at the expense of my hair and me being embarrassed of my hair, I'm embarrassed of my hair.
Yeah.
It's like, but I'm not. I was never somebody that was pointing. I actually wasn't somebody that was pointing things out about racism growing up, because at the end of the day, I was surrounded by a bunch of people that wouldn't know what I was talking about anyways.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, you didn't know what you were talking about. So.
Exactly. I didn't know either. It's just like, I feel a way right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Basically, I'm gonna cry about it on my own time. Whatever.
Yeah, but you probably also perceive it as an individual moment, right? It's like, oh, like my feet are too big for my body, like when you go through those growth spurts and you're like, oh my God, I'm only like 4'5" and I got a size 10 shoe or whatever. And you think that's your individual problem, not a larger systemic issue. So I think that's so interesting. So I want to ask you to kind of circle back and connect all this, is how has yoga played a role in all of this identity beingness, like, because yoga in the United States is largely white, like Lululemon ads, mostly white people. I mean, for their, to their credit, they are starting to put in more people of color in their advertising and their marketing. But for the most part, when people say yoga, we imagine a yoga studio with thin white women who can move their bodies into pretzels, right? into those bendy shapes. So how has yoga treated you, we'll say, and how has that helped or hindered who you are being as a person of color?
Good question. So with yoga, I would say I've learned a lot of great things through yoga. A huge part of yoga is self-reflection. So it gives me the chance to self-reflect. And that's part of why, you know, I sit here and I've said to you already, like, I don't fault these folks for that, because this is their conditioning. This is yoga language coming from me, because as a teenager / early 20s person, I would have faulted everybody. I wouldn't have thought of any conditioning, nor would I have cared of any conditioning. It would have just been, this person's a so-and-so, you know, and that would have been that. So the yoga in itself, pardon me, we're in Puerto Rico, so if you hear a little reggaeton driving by right now, that's what's going on. So
that's fun. I wish I was there.
It's great. It's hilarious and it's great. And it's not 3 a.m, so it's all good. So anyhow, the yoga and self-reflection, it's a huge part. And through self-reflection, you're also able to learn other people as well, and kind of put yourself into their shoes. And that's part of what I do, is always put myself into another person's shoes. So it's really not their fault either that there's so, you know, especially in Vermont, it's not their fault that it's predominantly a white yoga class when I walk into it, right? Because that's the population.
Right.
It's just the population. So no matter what, I could walk into a yoga class, I could walk into the grocery store, and it's still going to be a primarily white situation, right?
Yeah, because of the demographic of where your studio is located. Yeah,
you know, and especially in this place. So being there, I always, you know, you kind of walk around knowing that people have these
conditioning
that they have. They have the conditioning. So I'm extra friendly, per se. So I smile at people. I learned this at a young age, that if I smile at people, then they're not going to be as scared of me if I'm smiling. So I started smiling, not because I'm happy, but because I want to make other people comfortable.
Now, but see, so here's I wanna sort of like rub up against that, because
no, totally. I'm
you know where I'm going with this.
I'm saying that I do it, like that I was doing it in that situation. It's not a good thing.
Okay,
that's where that's where I was, because like, I need to do this in order
be safe, right?
In order to even have a conversation with somebody half the time, or to not, you know, it's just what I did at a young age, because I knew that otherwise people were just scared of me.
So do you do that now, or what do you do now?
No, not anymore, especially in Puerto Rico. Everybody smiles at each other over here.
Well, Puerto Rico is Puerto Rico. Everyone's happy when the sun is out.
But no, in Vermont, no, I hung up the smiling gloves, you know? So I don't do that anymore. And now it's I did that really just as a way to kind of lessen the fear factor for other people. And I've read articles about it. Like, I never even realized that
you were doing it,
that I was doing it. Like, until I read these articles, and I was like, oh geez, I always had to do that growing up, you know? It's like, otherwise I was the bad kid in class. Otherwise I was, you know, getting sent to the you know, I was getting, you know, followed around by teachers at school, waiting for me to do something wrong. Right.
And that's the system, right? That's the system we're talking about. It's like people of color are shaping themselves to accommodate the system, when we really need to just like take that apart.
Exactly. And that was the only reason why I cut you off, because I wanted you to know that I know it's complete BS.
I was like, okay, I hope you know that. Okay.
That's literally like the self-oppression by myself from the oppressive society. Anyway, I actually felt like these were things that I had to do in order to make somebody else's
and you're not the only one. You know, that's got to be like every Black person in the United States. You know, in order to feel safe, you need to shrink yourself or accommodate you know, whatever system is in place so as not to be perceived as threatening. Which is messed up, which is totally messed up. And so how do you negotiate? I mean, now that you've hung up the smile gloves, how do you negotiate those spaces with the yogic philosophies applied?
Well, now with the yogic philosophies applied, I guess, I don't know, can you reword that, I guess?
Yeah. So is it like namaste while I give you the finger?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But it's more like, you know, so I mean, I know there's a piece that we want to get to in this conversation, but I want, before we go in that direction, I'm wondering about, like, how do we continue to be active in fighting for racial justice, right? Dismantling systemic racism with kindness and compassion, that we can draw from the yogic philosophy that, you know, and I'll just say that we are all one, you know, and I know there might be some eyeballs rolling like, oh God, here we go with we're all one, you know, but we are all human beings, right? And I think racism is very much amplified, more so in this country than any other one in, you know, across the globe. So how do we use yoga philosophies and teachings to help dismantle racism, to help take down the system so that we can all, for once and for all, see that we are all human beings? I don't know. I don't have an answer, but I want to hear what you say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer, but I have some thoughts, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
So, you know, recently through yoga, because like you said, there's a lot of women in the yoga scene. There's a lot of women yoga teachers. So now my wife is a great yoga teacher for me. I was also trying to find like a male yoga teacher and also we have the husband and wife relationship as well. So I was looking for kind of like an outside teacher, and I just wanted a male teacher, not because I had a female teacher, even though she's my wife. I had a female teacher, but I just wanted I wanted other stuff too, basically. I just to kind of keep me in check. And so I started going to classes and kind of traveling around and doing classes with different people. And plus I liked, you know, an athletic, strong yoga practice, that, you know, that asana practice. I wanted to be, you know, and I was into handstands at the time. I still am, but that was attractive to me. And I knew that if there's handstands that are offered in a class, that it'll be a physically demanding class. And part of, when I say physically demanding, I say physically demanding in the sense that it gives me a lot of things to do for me to stay focused on and to work through my body. Because if you study yoga, you'll find that there's this life force within us called prana, which I know you're familiar with. But through the activation of the muscles and through the engagement of the muscles, we can actually open up all of the nadi channels, the energy channels in our body, which allows the prana to move through our whole body. And through this prana, we can move our consciousness through our body and become more aware. And then when we've become more aware, then we can start really meditating and whatnot. So anyhow, so when I say physically demanding, that's where I'm going with it, because I'm looking at the prana side of things, that physicality of the asana and stuff. So it brought me to a male teacher that I thought was good, because most all of these the yoga philosophy, it was being presented in a way that everybody is one, like you just said. So when we're there and we're doing this yoga practice, and we start to see everybody around, and everybody is on board with with we're all one, that is a nice thing, theoretically.
Theoretically,
It's a
yeah.
nice thing.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
practically it's a different issue, because people tend to use that phrase as a bypass for doing the actual work. It's like, oh, racism doesn't really exist because we're all one. But you know what? I'm in this 3D body and people treat me differently because I am a brown Asian woman,
Yeah. Well, and that's really what happened to me. So I'll go into it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to bring everything up, but basically, if we rewind a year here and we move back to the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, and we have the George Floyd murders. So we see that across the country there was rioting, there were a lot of protesting, there was there were these people saying this and these people saying that, and everybody, I don't know how to really describe it, but some people, they were kind of missing the point that this person just got killed in front of everybody, and you're sitting there and you're saying, well, the guy was a dopehead, the guy was on heroin, the guy was resisting.
Yeah.
All of these things, and these are yogis that are saying this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
let's unpack that a little bit. Let's talk about how we know there are seekers out there who are looking for like a deeper meaning of life. They're looking for spiritual guidance. And then there are these teachers who some people call them gurus, some call them, like mentors or whatever. And often, we're all human, right? And so some of these gurus, as has been famously, publicized, are certain gurus who, are accused of inappropriate behavior with their teachers, or even like sexual violence. But so it raises the question of these so-called gurus as far as like what they teach, and do they practice what they teach? Do they actually understand the concepts that they are trying to share with their students and able to apply it to themselves? Now, I know that one of your teachers, who's also one of my teachers, doesn't seem to make that connection. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what happened last year that I don't know, just showed the truth of this particular guru who, if you want to name him, you can name him. It's, it's totally up to you. I could go either way.
Yeah, I probably will, but first I'm going to talk a little bit on the matter before I even name him.
Yeah.
Now, here's what happened. Like, to get things really kicking off here is that this person has a very large community, and he had introduced us to lots of different people. Now, one of these people that he introduced us to, he had introduced this person that he said, hey, this is like a son to me. So this person was making posts about, the whole George Floyd thing, and kind of getting into white privilege. He was posting all these different memes that were very borderline, Nazi, racist type stuff. And I tried to talk with him. Nothing happened. Scylla tried to talk to him. Nothing happened. So then I went to the teacher and I said, hey, you've got to talk to this kid, because this kid is going the wrong direction. He needs help. The stuff that he's saying isn't okay. The teacher looked at it and he said, oh my goodness, I've got to talk to him. So then he talks to him. The kid comes back to me and he says, can we agree to disagree? I didn't understand your experience. So he turned it into my experience. Now, upon his reaction or his response to that, I said, whoa. I said, no, we're done here. I can't do this, because it's not an agree to disagree type of scenario.
Right.
Yeah. So then I went back to the teacher and I said, we need to talk, because whatever conversation you had, it didn't lead to the result of what needed to be done. And so I spoke, and so I spoke with him, and I started to, how they say hindsight is 2020, right? Yeah. So as I'm speaking to him, and I'm saying, this is why this is wrong,
Uh-oh, internet is spotty again.
Is it better?
Okay, yeah, it's better. So just to kind of recap, so this kid who was posting almost Nazi-like memes in response to the George Floyd murder, he ended up not really understanding what he did was wrong. He just sort of bypassed it.
Yeah, well, what he did was he turned around and he said, I don't know your experience, and I need to be more careful of the things that I post.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the thinking.
That doesn't change your thinking.
Right.
It doesn't change your thinking.
Yeah. So you turned to the teacher, right, and said, "Hey, we need to fix this."
Exactly. So I went back to him, and he asked me all the reasons of why it's not okay, and so I started talking with him, and all of the conversations that I've had with him. See, now, one of the things that I'm just going to say his name, Raghu, because just for the sake of conversation, he teaches these lessons to be tolerant. He teaches these lessons.
Right, these pillars.
The six pillars, right? So the 6 pillars are kind of just there for everybody to be tolerant of him. It doesn't even have anything to do with the real world. It's to be tolerant of him and his quote unquote obtuseness and his own shortcomings and his own dented can. That's why he's saying these things. He says it so we can actually be forgiving, I guess, or take pity on him. And I was talking with somebody earlier today that was like, yeah, I actually felt bad for him. And that's how I think a lot of us feel. We actually end up feeling bad. And that's why so many of the excuses when I talk with people about him, and everybody that feels that he has these shortcomings as well, what most of the people that I speak with say is, oh, he's human. And to which I respond, of course he's human. What else would anybody think? Of course he's human. Yeah. So that being human is a great thing, because that gives you, just like all of these people that I knew when they were kids, they did certain things. They don't do it now. Being a human gives you the ability to self-reflect and to change said things. So here's what's going on, is that all of this happened a year ago. After I had the conversation with him, he thanked me. He said, I feel closer. And he washed his hands and he never called me again. And that's the fact of the matter. So I said to him, even the next day after the conversation, I sent a text and I said, I'd really like to talk in person, because I don't want you to think that I'm angry. And I appreciate us talking. To which he responded, and I would read it to you, but I'm using my phone right now. So I can't read it because I'm doing the Zoom. Our internet is bugged out. But he responded, thanks, I feel closer. If we're going to teach and serve together, then we need to always be forthright with this kind of stuff. Thank you. He asked me what books that he could well, first he had asked me if I could teach him on this subject of racism and whatnot, which I'm not even equipped or qualified to do. I said, there's plenty of books out there.
Mm-hmm.
Read White Fragility. We read this book. Read that. He
How
said,
to be
"Oh,
an
thank you."
anti-racist, right?
Yeah, and he said, "Thank you," and literally, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And we had a teacher training plan. We had all these things planned, but he ghosted on me, and that was that. And he had literally been, calling us almost every day prior to that. So again, this is back in the pandemic. So one of the conversations that I had, this is how hindsight is 2020. One of the conversations that I had with him was telling, he called me saying that he wanted to buy a gun because he was worried about looters coming to his farm in the middle of upstate New York and whatnot. And I said, nobody's coming to your farm. I said, you don't need a gun. Maybe you need a gun, but not for those reasons. It's not going to be for any looters coming to your farm to steal whatever you have at your farm. Yeah. And he was just getting very worked up in the whole pandemic and whatnot. And that was really, he was stuck. He was in a stuck place, and a lot of people were. But that doesn't mean that that you're just
you don't stay there. You don't stay there. Yeah,
you move through it. You look at it and you move through it.
Yeah.
So with the rest of that, so he continues. He does this podcast, and around that time, see, I didn't know it because I don't follow this particular person on the internet, but somebody had called him out on the internet for being racist. Now, I listened to him gaslight this person on the show, not knowing that he was gaslighting this person. Fast forward to this year, and I started speaking with another person that I knew through him, and they had experienced other problems with him, not racist problems, as this person is white, but more along the thing is that with him, he's actually got, I was very tolerant of his business, of his friendship, of his always asking for things, never really wanting to do anything for anybody else. I was tolerant of all this because I thought I was doing it for the greater good, because his message seemed to be a good message at the time.
Because usually that's how it goes with these gurus, right?
Yeah. And so this other person said, "Hey, well, did you ever read this post from last year?" So I went down this person's Facebook page. I scrolled down and I finally found it. And the date of it is right around the same time, within days of what was going on with me and him. And so I was able to see him gaslight her and him being cold to her and being blatantly sexist, because he wasn't that way with me. He was very rude to her. He wasn't rude to me. He just washed his hands with me and never and didn't speak to me again.
So this poses the big question of, like, who, for us as, we'll just say, regular people, who are we learning from? Like who do we see teaching, and are they practicing the very philosophies that they're trying to teach? And from what I've seen, it's like he's stuck in the same loop and not really seeing that he's stuck. He doesn't, there's no self-reflection.
No self-reflection, no practice of yoga, and very much so just hiding behind things. And it's quite evident. I mean, it's just evident if you pay attention to him. He's all over the place. He can't even sit down in one spot. That's not what yogis are.
It's hard because I had my own personal experience with him, where I brought up racism. And this was before pandemic even. And I was asking, you know, how do you translate the spiritual practices, the spiritual teachings, and apply it to the 3D world, you know, because we are on this planet in a human body. You know, a lot of his teachings are about like these other realms. It's like, that's cool and all, right? That's cool. But we're here right now. We're like physically living in a body. You know, I'm in this body in a country that treats brown bodies like garbage, you know, that, okay, so what am I supposed to do when I'm given this spiritual teaching? How do those connect? Because there was a gap for me that it was like, okay, spiritual teachings are like all kumbaya, we're all uncool. Am I supposed to let racist people treat me like garbage? Like, no, you know, it's like this whole like be tolerant, be forgiving. I'm not a doormat, you know. And so I brought this question to him about this stuff. And he basically circumvented the answer. He said, you know, well, today I'm a white guy, but you know, next life I could be like a brown woman, or maybe I was a brown woman in previous life. And I'm like, but that doesn't apply to what's happening right now. So tell me, like, what can we do right now? And he just, you know, sort of checked out and dodged the question. And I even said to him, you have a big platform and a lot of people listen to you. And the fact that you're not saying anything speaks volumes. I mean, to the people that are not your followers, you know, the fact that you don't say anything or speak out against racism. I don't remember what it was that was happening, because it was before George Floyd, but you know, there's always something happening when it comes to racism. And I just would have liked for him to say something about it. He didn't have to go on a whole podcast episode about it, you know, but just some kind of acknowledgement. And I got no response. I got, you know, silence. I got the opt out, you know, I got the same thing as you, where it was like, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I really appreciate you. Bye. You know?
Can I build on that? So
yeah.
So back to me bringing it to his attention, and now here we are, just like you. I brought it to his attention here.
Yeah.
He thanked me. He acknowledges it, and then proceeds. Here we are a year later, and
same story.
He's still saying these things. He's constant. You know, one of the things that he does, or that he says, is, you know, he knocks on rap music. I made a post a few weeks ago. I think that you saw it, but I did make a post. I made the post not because I wanted to attack him or anything like that. That's not what's going on. And quite frankly, doing this interview with right now is kind of to defend myself too, because after I made a post about his sexism and racism and the fact that you can't be sexist and racist and be a legitimate yoga teacher. So I say that it's a fraud, that you're a fraud because of these things. These are two of the reasons why you're a fraud. But so by my making this post, he interprets that as a quote unquote as a shotgun of hate, which he says on his show, which I don't know, they claim that there's thousands of people listening to it. So here we are on your podcast that 1 year ago, you said you wouldn't talk about the George Floyd case because you wanted to keep it spiritual. But now, a year later, you want to do woe is me and gaslight me as if I'm doing it out of hatred. I wasn't doing it out of hatred. I was actually doing it out of protection mode, because I needed to clear it up with the yoga community that this person is not associated with me, because I introduced him to a lot of different people. There are people that went to India based on me saying, come to India. This guy is the real deal. So I needed to get rid of that, because the things that he's been saying as of late, he literally sat there saying how bad rap music was because of the lyrics. It was because of the lyrics. He said that they say bad things about women. He said that they say bad things about cops. A very, very much old school argument from the early 90s. This is, we're in 2021. There's a lot of different rappers, a lot of different lyrics, a lot of different genres of rap even.
Yeah.
So, and then in the next week, you're quoting a country song, singing it, saying that it's a great song, and that it's too bad that it got quote unquote Me Too'd, and laughing about the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
So what do you have a problem with? Because the song, throw another log on the fire, when you Google the song, it comes up as the misogynistic anthem of the United States of America. So I didn't know the song. I never heard the song. I never heard the lyrics. So I Googled it because I had to see what they were talking about. And it's very, the lyrics are terrible. It's telling women not to get fat. It's telling women to throw a log on the fire. It's basically, I mean,
fetch my slippers, wife.
Listeners.
I hate it.
Listen to this song that he claims is a great song.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you're saying that rap has gotten evil because of the lyrics. What do you really hate? Do you hate the lyrics? Because if that's the case, you should hate this song as well. Or do you hate the person singing or saying or writing the lyrics?
Right. Because that person is a person of color.
Because that person is a person of color, just like his language. He says you don't call people dog. You don't say yo. Everything that he does is very much anti-Black culture. And that was what my post was. And I had all these people jumping on. Not one of them is asking me what my experience was. They're just jumping on to defend Ragu. So when you're just jumping on to defend Ragu, that means that you have an attachment to Ragu and a love for Ragu. Now,
but there's no self-reflection either on their part.
Exactly. So where does Krishna fall into this? Because if you're saying that we're all one and that the devotees are all one underneath Krishna, then why are you now all of a sudden not speaking to me because I called Ragu out on his blatant racism, which could have been fixed a year ago? My intention was not to say, oh, I want to argue with this guy or anything like that. My intention in telling him, as instructed, because he asked me for so long, Noah, please tell me if I'm ever out of line. Please tell me if I'm ever, all of these things. And then when I do,
he doesn't mean it. He doesn't mean it.
Yeah, you actually had the chance to work on this stuff. But you chose not to, and you're still saying he's a skipping record. He's still saying the same thing. If you listen to his story on rap and how it's bad, you'll hear him saying it over and over again. I mean, you can listen to him saying it like 3 times in the last few months on his show. He has no new information. He's not working. He's not
evolving. He's not evolving.
He's not evolving in any type of way. He's still sitting there with the same problems instead of taking a chance to work on himself, which was my goal. I wanted him to work on himself.
Well, here's the thing. We can only help people who want our help, right? I mean, that's lesson number 1 in anything. Doesn't matter if you're a yogi, a therapist, or just somebody who likes helping people. Nobody will take your help unless they ask for it. It's like we have all the answers, not answers, solutions, right? We see when people have a problem or a challenge, we can see the solution because we're not in it often, right? Often we can't see our own problems and we need someone else to reflect them back to us. But if we are not open to receive that information, if we didn't ask for help, we don't want it, And so the question then becomes, what's in my power? What power do I have? What are my choices? And so for me and for you, our choices were to distance ourselves from this particular teacher. The question is now, what more do we do? Because his influence over so many people is far reaching that it doesn't serve humanity. So, we've taken care of the personal aspect, right? I've distanced myself, you've distanced yourself. but we can't, if we are true yogis, we can't just sit by and let him continue to perpetuate these messages of racism and sexism, of narrow-mindedness. And so what can we do as individuals, but also collectively? You know, that's a question that I have for anybody, but for you right now, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, part of it is doing what we're doing right now, because so many people they don't know, because you know, one of the things that happened when I made the post was people were saying, oh, I didn't experience this, and other people would jump on and say, yeah, you didn't experience it because you're not black, you're a white guy, or whatever. And
Right.
so a lot of people don't realize it's going on anyways. And
Right.
again, that comes down to conditioning that they don't know. So
Yeah.
now when we vocalize it and we say that these things are happening, now we have these people that are listening. They can choose to either say, you know, I don't care, I'm going to still listen to this guy.
Yeah.
Or they can say, oh, wow, this isn't the type of stuff that I want to hear. And why would I want to listen to something?
Right. Right.
You know, if they're not actually going to act it out. It's very easy to talk. Anybody can sit around and talk, which is what he does. He sits around and talks. He brags about having the gift of gab, you know, but what I'm finding is that he doesn't do much of anything. He really doesn't do much of anything. He doesn't do any service. Everything that he does, he gets paid for. He's very much money driven. And I mean,
so what I'm hearing, go ahead.
No, it's just you realize these things. I mean, I was sitting at a table with him one time, filled with other white folks, and he was going off on a tangent, and wherever it went, he got into the whole white privilege and how white privilege doesn't exist. And now he's doing this at a table with all other white people, and he looks at me and he says, "Right, Noah?" And
oh my God. Oh my God.
You know, and what do I do? It's like I'm at a table
right.
full of white people.
Right.
And you know what I did? I just bypassed it, because at that point I was being tolerant to the ignorance. And that's what I was doing. He actually, you know, I thought he was my friend. I thought I could help him otherwise. I was trying to do these things.
Yeah. And that's dangerous.
But
I mean, that's that's the dangerous part of these gurus who are preaching and not practicing what they preach, is that the followers, you know, they are so devoted devotees to whatever the teacher, the guru is saying without questioning it, that then I mean, then it's just automatic. You know, if you get wrapped up in his storytelling and in his proclamations, right? Like, you know, I take no offense. Okay, so first of all, I hate that one, because like, who are you to tell me like to take no offense, right? If I want to be offended, that's my choice to be offended, right? But if it's an invitation to like, notice if you get offended, what that's about, that's different than just declaring I take no offense. Like, I hated that one so much, right? But there are people who are like, oh, here are the 6 pillars for me to be like a true devotee, to be like closer to God, to Krishna, or whatever it is. And then, like, at what cost, right? So then they can't think for themselves. They're like, oh no, I can't, you know, I got to be the doormat. I have to be tolerant. I have to take no offense. I have to do all these other things in order to get the approval of the guru, in order to get closer, to get some sort of like, you know, grace, some sort of anointing by this guru that I've put on this pedestal. And so that's the damaging part of it, is when someone on this pedestal is racist and sexist and is also not evolving, is not self-aware, is totally delusional. And you have all these people who are ready to learn and are seeking answers, and they find this guy, then it becomes dangerous, because they end up thinking like him without self-reflection. And that just perpetuates the problem that we're trying to eradicate.
Exactly. And thank you for saying that, because you have the words that I do not, because oftentimes I just get stuck when I'm trying to speak and I'm like, what are the words trying to come out of my mouth? But you just said it perfectly. And that's why I, why I made the post that I did, because I want people to know. And what happened was nobody knows the relationship that I had with him either. So, these people that are jumping and defending so much don't realize that, I was on his, weekly call list of me giving him life advice. He would call me asking for things. He called me saying, hey, Noah, I need to get away from things. Can I come to your house? And I said, yeah, the door's unlocked. Go, we're not going to be there. He shows up at our house. That's the type of relationship that I had with him.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm just some disgruntled student here.
Right.
I'm somebody that listened to things. He told me things in confidence now that I can look back at and I can say, the guy is a racist.
Yeah.
The guy is a sexist. I was being tolerant. And guess what? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say, you know what, Noah, you were wrong for being tolerant to all of this stuff and being quiet for so long. But again, I was under this
the spell.
The abusive teacher. It's kind of like how Stockholm syndrome,
Yeah.
People are okay to their abusers sometimes, and we know this stuff, and sometimes we got to get out of the relationship to realize how bad it was. And that's really what happened here, was that we were tolerant of so much, but then all of a sudden the racism is what made the cork blow on it. And I said, whoa. And then I started realizing all of these things and how it actually is racist and how he's not changing these past memories. Like, he still portrays himself as the poor white kid that got beat up by black kids at school. Like that's still a story that he tells, which means that he's still living there and he's still thinking these things. And I heard him blatantly lie about things, to which one of them is the very podcast that he does right now. That whole podcast that he does right now was started because myself and two other people wanted to take these classes in the morning with him. We wanted to stay connected. So we started doing that. When he tells this story now, he leaves me out of the equation. He never, and I never needed credit. It's not because I need credit. I just like to see things be told as they were. And you can't just erase somebody out of the story.
Well, if you're white, you can.
That's kind of what they're arguing about through the whole high school system right now, right? It's a critical race theory, right? So they erase these things, and that's what he's doing right now. He's erasing me out of the whole start of wisdom of the. I've renamed it Wisdom of the Stooges. So it's not Wisdom of the Sages; it's Wisdom of the Stooges. And I'm gonna make some memes, and I'm gonna put them up, because I need to make fun of the situation.
And so just to be clear, like, for our listeners, this is not the intention is not to take down Raghu. It's to share the truths and the stories of what's happening behind the scenes, because all you see is the public persona, right? And if you don't see what's happening behind the curtain, if you don't see the reality of how a teacher is racist and sexist, then how can change actually happen? And so we're bringing these stories forward in order to shine light on what the real story is. And the thing is, and this is a teaching in yoga, but in a lot of spiritual communities, is that we can find evidence to support anything we believe. So if Raghu is like saying something as like, there's no such thing as white privilege, he will be able to find evidence of, white privilege not existing to support his view, because he can choose to look away from like statistics of, Black women are denied small business loans all the time over like white women, like, no, there's no white privilege there. I'll just look away from that. So just to be clear to the listeners, like, we are sharing these stories because we want to shine a light on an aspect of this predominantly popular teacher in yoga communities, who's causing some real damage to communities of color. And it won't be tolerated, because if we stay silent, we're just complicit in creating that harm as well.
Yeah.
So Noah, I appreciate you for coming forward and sharing your experiences and your story, not just about Raghu, but just about, you in general, like your whole journey through yoga, and what it was like to grow up as a person of color in a very white state, not even like the town, like the state.
Yeah.
And so it informs a lot of how you experience the world and how you interact with people. And so I'm really glad that you're able to call Raghu out on some of his stuff, even if he's not going to listen, but to really bring voice to injustices that a lot of people like fail to see. So I really appreciate you for that, for vocalizing it, and just being so forthcoming with it, because it's not easy. A lot of people of color see injustices, but are not so forthcoming. Like, they're reluctant because they fear for safety, they fear repercussions, things like that. But I don't know about you, but I'm at a point where, like, I don't care anymore because this has gone on too long. So I think it's just important for us to get the word out. So thank you. I really appreciate you. Yeah. So if we could wrap up our podcast conversation with a little Rumi, does that sound cool with you?
Sounds good to me.
Oh, and I like this one. It's a little bit longer than the Hafez poem, but we'll just read this poem and then we will close it out. This one's called Where Everything is Music. Don't worry about saving these songs. And if one of our instruments breaks, it doesn't matter. We have fallen into the place where everything is music. The strumming and the flute notes rise into the atmosphere. And even if the whole world's harp should burn up, there will still be hidden instruments playing. So the candle flickers and goes out. We have a piece of flint and a spark. This singing art is sea foam. The graceful movements come from a pearl somewhere on the ocean floor. Poems reach up like spindrift and the edge of driftwood along the beach, wanting. They derive from a slow and powerful root that we can't see. Stop the words now. Open the window in the center of your chest and let the spirits fly in and out. See, can't life just be like that? Just let the spirits fly in and out and we could all just love.
Right.
Yeah. All right, my friends, my listeners. So that wraps up our episode for today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Noah Weisman. You can find him and his wife Sukha Yoga Studio in Burlington, Vermont. I will put the website in the show notes so you guys can reach out to both of them. They're amazing people. So if you have the chance to study with them, please do. Don't hesitate at all. So to close it out, my friends, the divine light in me bows to the divine light in you. Until next time, namaste.